FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
Well, legitimacy is an extremely important thing to understand, because the legitimacy of this regime is not based exclusively on generating a stated number of real GDP growth. One of the things that most impressed me when I was in China last year, and I was there quite a bit filming the documentary series The Ascent of Money, was the extent to which nationalism is now a crucial source of legitimacy for the system, and not entirely one that the regime intended to grow as it has. A couple of years ago, I became interested in the impact of the internet on China, and I got some of my Chinese students at Harvard, which you're right, Jim, are numerous, to help me investigate this. I had in my mind a hypothesis, which turned out to be completely wrong. And the hypothesis was that as the internet spread through China, and it's now reached the point that there are more internet users there than in the United States, it would be like the printing press in Germany in the early 16th century. It would bring about a kind of political reformation. It would transform the way in which people related to one another, because for the first time there would be free horizontal communication. It wouldn't all be top-down. Completely wrong. It turns out that what the internet really facilitates in China is nationalism. And young Chinese, particularly at universities, use the internet with tremendous creativity to transmit ideas about national identity, which I think are in many ways quite unnerving. And I encountered this in three forms last year. It manifested itself first against the Western media for the way that they handled the Tibet crisis. Extraordinary videos were doing the rounds on the internet, not official, produced by, I think, young people. Then it manifested itself again after the earthquake, and I was in China at that time and witnessed that extraordinary coming together that occurred in the wake of the great earthquake. And of course, then it happened officially at the time of the Olympics. So the legitimacy of this regime is not entirely dependent on economic growth. But the more economic problems they have, the more it seems to me that they will rely on nationalism. Now, I mention this partly because I'm a historian, I think historically. And Jim just drew a historical analogy when he said that this was a lot like the relationship between China and America.
I said that aspect of the webs was like it.
Right, so the cultural web was a lot like the relationship between the United States and Britain, say 100 years ago or 50 years ago. Actually, you know what it really reminds me of? It really reminds me of the relationship between Britain and Germany 100 years ago. Deeply intertwined economically, deeply intertwined culturally, but for reasons not wholly under the control of leaders in either country, on a collision course. And that seems to me a much better and more troubling historical parallel, because so much about China today reminds me of the Kaiser's Germany. Rapid economic growth, self-confidence about that growth, a sense that the bad years are behind you and the future lies before you. And then increasingly a rather shrill nationalism. That's the thing that worries me.
Here.